We're looking back at the past and forward into the future on today's ChurchTechCast.com's Tech Help for Churches. Hey everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. I, of course, am your host, Paul Allen Clifford, and I want to put my lower third up. There it is. There's my lower third, and I want you to join the conversation. Paul at trinitydigitalmedia.com, or head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact, and you can find all my contact information there. And I just want you guys to know how appreciative I am of your time. I know that you've got a lot of things to do. If you work in the church, you're a busy person. If you work outside of the church and you volunteer, first off, never say, I'm just a volunteer. You're making that ministry happen. So you're not just a volunteer. You're someone who spends 40 hours a week or whatever in a regular job, and then you spend the overflow to help change lives in eternity. So that really matters. And so I recognize just how much time and attention is involved in that, so I really appreciate it. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about a couple of things. First off, I want to talk about churchstreaming.tv. Churchstreaming.tv is my streaming provider, and they enable me to do all the streaming that I'm doing right now, including to those of you who are watching on the Roku channel. Welcome to watching Tech Help for Churches on Roku. You gave me quite a spike in my numbers last week, and I really appreciate it. Churchstreaming.tv provides a flat rate service, so there's no surprise at the end of the month about how much the bill is. And you would think that that would be a lot more than other services that provide service for a base fee plus bandwidth. No, with Churchstreaming.tv, it's very competitive, and as I say, you're not surprised at the end of the month, and that is worth something right there. So head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/churchstreaming to check them out and get your free trial and see if it's right for you. Also, I want to have you take a look at my pastor's book, What Life Are You Waiting For? Head over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/whatlifebook to pre-order your copy. This is coming out early part of next year, and as I'm recording it, that next year is just a couple of days away. So I really want you to head over and get your copy. I think you'll be really pleased. The foreword is by Bill Hybels, which some of you guys may have heard of him, since he's the senior pastor of Willow Creek Community Church, one of the largest churches in the country there in Chicago, Illinois. So I really would encourage you to go to Amazon and pick up your copy today. It's being published by Tyndale House, so this isn't a dubious book. This is it's got a lot of weight behind it. So let's get started on our topic as my dog barks loudly in the background. I hope that that's not too distracting or obvious for you. So this past year on this show, we've talked about all kinds of stuff. I've talked about making child themes in WordPress. I've talked about digital street preaching, Twitter, WordPress as a CMS, online giving, YouTube for churches, and that was all in the first couple of months. So feel free to go back to the archives. If you just go to trinitydigitalmedia.com/category/THFC, you can find all the past shows listed there. We talked about blogging, church website mistakes, Google keywords in your sermons, being imitators of God and being everywhere. That was a fun one. Live tweeting the sermon, and much, much more. So I just wanted to give you kind of a quick retrospective about where we have been as a show, as a community, because you're eternity changers, every one of you. Maybe you think, well, I don't really do much. No, if you're helping Jesus in the kingdom, you are an eternity changer. Don't discount that. So, and I also wanted to talk about some trends that I see forming. These aren't things that I've heard on high. This isn't, and the Lord gave me this message and I got to give it to you. Please don't hear me making fun. I was just, okay, maybe a little bit, but I really hope that you just get my sense of humor. That these aren't things that I've heard from God. These are just trends that I've noticed. Take them for that with a grain of salt, and we'll go from there. First off, let's talk about social media. There are tons of social media networks. We've got Pinterest, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, etc. I see most of those going up and to the right in the future, with the possible exception of Facebook. Now, a lot of people are going to say, Paul, Facebook is the largest one. They just can't die. I'm not saying that they're going to die. I mean, look at some of the examples from the past. So, I can't even remember the name. Oh, MySpace. MySpace still exists, but it's not what it used to be. And I fear that if Facebook doesn't continue on, it doesn't change the trend that they're on, they're going to be a MySpace. And I think they see that, and I think that they're getting desperate in what they're doing, and I think that that's part of what's fueling all of this is desperation. They're a public company now, so they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make as much money as possible, and I get that. And I get that they're a free service. My wife says I shouldn't be complaining about them because they're free, but it does feel a little bit, you guys all know what I'm talking about, it feels a little bit, just a little bit, like a bait and switch that they invited with open arms all the businesses, ministries, etc. onto their service, and they said, come, we have people, we will let you build this community, and as a side benefit, it'll make us even more popular. Please come on in, the water's warm, it's great. And then they very recently decided that they're changing the algorithm so that if you like a page, that doesn't mean that you necessarily get to hear from them. And I get the sentiment behind that, the idea that there's so much that you can never digest it all. But it seems very disingenuous to immediately follow that up with, we don't want to pollute our users' stream with too much from advertisers. But if you were to pay, for example, then we could pollute. We're not against that. Don't get us wrong. It's the free stuff we don't want to do. Yeah, very disingenuous. And it seems like part of what their service is built on is the expectation of privacy, and they keep saying, let's chip away at that. A little bit more. So I'm a little concerned about Facebook for the future. I think that they have a right to make money. The worker is worth his wages. I believe that. I just think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. There's a good way and a bad way to do it. I think that you can really engage with people. You can provide more value for people, as opposed to trying to take more and more and sell that. And I think the take more and more and sell that is the only idea they've got. And I think it's cultural and systemic. And so that's something to be concerned about. I think that it could be they'll reverse this trend, but I just don't see it. So in 2014, will they start to decline? Maybe. If not, if they don't change some things, I think 2015 at the latest we'll start to see some declines in Facebook. For the others, I see them up and to the right. I think there will be more hip, cool, new social media for young people to embrace. Of course, as always, those of us that are older will generally assume that everything is about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So any new service, we'll figure out how it can be used for sex first, and then we'll accuse all the teenagers of using it. And while some of them will have already been doing it, others will say, man, that's a great idea. I never thought of it. So witness what happens with Snapchat, where a lot of the teens are using it as just kind of a goofy, funny, hey, I don't want to think about keeping this stupid picture, but I want to share it with my friends kind of thing. And of course the adults think it's all about sex. And for some teenagers it absolutely is, don't get me wrong, but I think that with any new technology there's always a panic. So look out for the new technologies and the associated panics that we will see coming up in the next year. I think that if the church is smart, we as the bride of Christ will embrace technology more and more. I think that you will see kind of two camps develop. A Amish-like camp where they're reacting against technology and assuming that the tool is the problem, not the people behind it. And you will see the other technophile camp that will err kind of the opposite way, saying that technology solves all our problems, and neither of those are true. And I love technology, but keep in mind that these are just tools, and it's how we use them. So just as I'm streaming live training for your church, for you to be more effective, that could just as easily be porn. That could just as easily be instructions on how to create a nuclear bomb. Any of that stuff is possible. So let's just keep in mind that we're talking about tools here. And it's how you use the tool, not the tool itself, that's the problem. A hammer can build a house for a homeless person just as easily as it can bash in a skull. One of those is good, one of them is evil. So it's not the hammer's fault, it's the person wielding it that causes the problem. So I think we'll see more of that, more people blaming the hammer, and more people saying the hammer is the savior, and neither of those are true. It's the people behind the tool that really make the difference. I think that we'll see more live video streaming. Since I got into live video streaming in April-May timeframe, I've been approached over and over again about what I know, and I don't know much. I haven't been doing this but for a few months, but the fact that I've been doing it day in and day out for several months, some people see me as this huge expert. So I think that we'll see more of this in the church. Now, that means that we'll have, again, two camps of this. In live streaming, we will have the add-on live streaming camp where they're already doing something and they say, hey, why don't we just add on streaming? And then we'll see a camp of people that really are intentional, that view this as an additional campus of their church, view the people as a constituency, they'll really reach out. Now, there will be some backlash. Some people will blame live streaming if church attendance goes down, and I think that that's a huge mistake. Church attendance has very little to do with live streaming. Live streaming video isn't as good a medium as actually being there. I mean, think about it. If you and I were sitting across from each other and I was talking to you, now I might not be letting you get a word in edgewise, but you could always ask me questions. You could always interact. I could see your eyes. I could see your face. You could shake my hand or punch me in the face. I mean, any of those things are possible when we're in person. But over this great distance, some of you are as far away from me as Hawaii, which it's probably 5 o'clock in the morning in Hawaii as I'm recording this. It's just not the same. And so I don't see people abandoning going to live church because there's video streaming. Now, if you're on vacation, if you're sick, if you're an older person, keep in mind that the older people of today were baby boomers in the 80s. And so people in their 70s, especially in their 60s and 70s, are much more technologically advanced than people in their 60s and 70s were even in the 90s. So we're at a point where it won't be long before you won't even have the preconceived notion that older people do not do technology. I'm 40 years old, so in 20 years, I will be 60. Hard to believe, but true. In 20 years, I'll be 60. So in 20 years, everyone my age that kind of jumped on the internet in college it will be foolish to assume that technology isn't something that older people know about. Just as older people right now are adopting these technologies, and that's not surprising given the fact that these are the people that were, say, in their 40s during the 80s. So think about that. Someone who is 75 was 45 in 1983. And if you're 45 and they bring in computers into your office and you're forced to learn them, the computers in 1983 were hard to use, difficult to use compared to the computers today. And even if you had trouble back then memorizing all the keyboard shortcuts and everything like that, nowadays with iPads and other touch devices, I think we're headed in a direction where there will be more and more older people that are technologically savvy, and when they no longer can go to church, instead of firing up the big church in the area that has a television ministry, they'll fire up your website and watch you. And that's the constituency that you'll reach out to online. And you can tailor that service specifically for certain constituencies, because you wouldn't necessarily have to have a huge room to accommodate certain areas. So if you wanted to have a traditional service, why not have the chapel, smaller sanctuary somewhere in your building where the organ and piano are located, and have a minister of music playing hymns and leading worship. If you want to do traditional church, you absolutely can in a smaller room and send that out. And so people could, at the same time, two people in the same house could watch the contemporary service and the traditional service. And then maybe the teenager who's homesick can watch the hip-hop service. So you could have 3 services going on at the same time in the same room. I think that telepresence is going to be a bigger thing in the future, and I think that culturally we're going to see a waning of Christian influence, but I don't want us to just automatically assume that that's the indication that it's the last days and that Jesus is coming back. We haven't finished evangelizing the world yet. I don't think he's coming back until we do, as I read the New Testament. So I think that we're in a low period of influence if we continue on the track that we're on. But I think that it can go back up because the church has fallen in and out of favor over time. There are things called the Great Awakening. There are things called the Protestant Reformation. Look at history. The church has lost impact and gained impact. Lost impact and gained impact. Kind of in an accordion back and forth sort of way over time. So I don't want you to be afraid that that in 2 generations everyone is going to be atheists. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that it's on our shoulders to make sure that it's not the case. That's why I'm doing this. And I really hope that in the next 10 years I'm not the only one doing this. I hope that, well, first off, I hope that this, which right now is me in my home office in just outside of Lexington, Kentucky, becomes a studio filled with people who love Jesus and have a heart to serve the church. I hope that this becomes something like what Twit is, or what Revision 3 is, or what CNET is now, but for the church. Not because we have to have our own Christian version, but because we have unique challenges that we deal with. And so that's what I hope that this will eventually be. And I hope that I'm not alone. I hope that we see channels of children's ministers and youth ministers and older adult ministers and family ministries and all these different areas aligning together to really use the internet and technology to reach outside the doors of the church. I'd love us to not just be attractional, but also missional. I don't think there's anything wrong with either one of those, but I think that they should both go together. And I think we have an opportunity right now to counteract the bad press that there is out there with good. So let's jump on it and be more and more in tune with getting the word out that we get to serve Jesus. I mean, it's amazing. And be his hands and feet, and be his tears, and be his heart to people. Because people are all that matter. They are. They're why he came. People are the treasure of heaven. I don't get it. I just know it's true. I don't know why, even though we're lower than ants compared to God, he cares for us. But he does. So let's share that message. Instead of being known for what we're against, let's figure out how to be known for what we're for, and that's people. Broken, messed up people, because that's what we all are. We're all broken, messed up people. So I hope that that's the trend that we're going to see. We're going to see more honesty in the church, less pretense, less pretending, and more genuine faith and love. So these are all some things that I see developing in the future. I think that our gut reaction will be to say how bad and evil a lot of things are, and there will be absolutely a lot of things that are bad and evil. But I think instead of cursing the darkness, our strategy needs to always be, how can we light a candle? I know it's not biblical, but I think the sentiment is real. That the darkness cannot overcome light. So if we shine more and more light, we will actually change eternity. So that's my hope for the future. And until next year, I'm Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.